doing? Oh, I don't have the agenda. I know the first part. We'll call the order, and we'll do the flex. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Open Public Meetings Act statement. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having a date, time, and place thereof posted at the Augusta, Branchville, Lafayette, and Sussex post offices, and notice sent to the New Jersey Herald, Star Ledger, and the clerk of the boroughs of Branchville and Sussex, and the townships of Frankfort, Lafayette, and Wantage. Mission statement: High Point Regional High School, in partnership with staff, family, and communities, dedicated to the quest for individual excellence by fostering high standards of achievement. We prepare students to become responsible and productive members of a diverse society. Roll call.
Mrs. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Encliffe.
Here.
Mr. Dunn.
Here.
Mr. Kehoe is not here. Ms. Keimer.
Here.
Mr. Morangi is not here. Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Dona.
Here.
Mr. Bealey.
Here.
Dr. Ripley.
Here.
And we also have Mr. Silvestro with us.
Okay. Executive session. A motion will be made. The High Point Regional High School Board of Education or executive session to provide an update on personnel, legal, and negotiations items which are exempt from public participation pursuant to New Jersey Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, Open Public Meetings Act. Any discussions held by the board which need not remain confidential will be made public when appropriate. Minutes of the executive session will not be disclosed until the need for confidentiality no longer exists. The board will reconvene a public session in the cafeteria annex at the conclusion of the executive session. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Which one's he I need a motion to return to public session.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Move on to the approval of minutes for the regular meeting minutes of January 21st, 2019, executive session minutes of January 21st, 2019. Need a motion?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a discussion point on it. I noticed that in the executive session, it discussed, bear with me, Mr. Minkwitz, our secretary, being dismissed from a part of the session. So that means there's no minutes from that session. Did anybody else take the minutes? Fortunately, we have Doug here. Doug, can you tell us if we need minutes for that part of the session?
So you have to, again, I wasn't here that meeting, so I don't know what was discussed.
Do we need minutes?
The requirement, you have the summary of the issues discussed at closed session, just as you do for the open. It doesn't require any set amount of detail, but it should say, if the discussion continued after Mr. Minkwitz left the room, there should be some note of what was discussed.
So there should be minutes from that session.
Yes, there should be some notation.
I looked back and noticed that in the prior meeting, the executive minutes also showed that Mr. Minkwitz was dismissed and there's no minutes from that portion of the meeting. Was anybody else taking minutes from that portion?
Any other discussion? All right, roll call.
Ms. Carmer?
Yes.
Mr. Dona?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
No.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Radcliffe?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes. All right, Mr. Dunn, you have a statement you wanted to read.
Yes, statement. The High Point Board of Education would like to make the following statement regarding discussion at our January meeting that appeared to indicate Superintendent Dr. Scott Ripley had not been evaluated as required for the past 4 years. We begin by making clear that the details of superintendent evaluations are highly confidential in nature, and aside from that portion an individual member contributes to the full evaluation, are not typically visible to other board members, to other administrators, to support staff, and cannot be released to the public. As such, it is very difficult to demonstrate to the public any physical proof that any evaluations were or were not completed. We note that it was only by nature of this board and superintendent's honesty that the apparent oversight was initially discussed publicly. We feel that it can only be through further commitment to honesty and transparency that the apparent oversight can be better understood, rectified, and moved beyond. Upon inspection, it was uncovered that the first of the 4 apparently missing evaluations, specifically that of 2015, was actually completed as required, but was simply not physically filed properly. In 2016, the transition to an online superintendent evaluation tool provided to us by the New Jersey School Board Association, designed to better protect confidentiality and supposedly to simplify the entire process, altered how individual members contributed to the full evaluation. Individual members may have completed their portions of the remaining 3 missing evaluations for 2016, 2017, and 2018 just as they were expected to, but the new process appears to have caused confusion as to how and when those individual portions were to be compiled and presented to the superintendent in a summary conference. The board recognizes now that regardless of how complete individual portions may have been, or whether or not the online tool was properly routing entered information, without the summary conference, we did not adhere to the full spirit of our board policy. More importantly, we lost an opportunity to better guide our superintendent. All board members serving during this period bear some responsibility for the errors of omission. For the past 4 years, High Point was determined by the New Jersey Department of Education to be a highly performing school district. Given that status, we were the only school in Sussex County to be twice waived from mandatory Quality Single Accountability Continuum, otherwise known as QSAC, audits. While a notable recognition of school and administration's hard work, the waivers unfortunately meant that further missed opportunities to uncover the incomplete superintendent evaluations were missed. The current High Point Board is committed to learning from this event and to using this opportunity to reinforce policy and to move beyond. By many accounts, High Point is a highly performing school district, and this board and administration are proud of our accomplishments. We are hopeful that the public grants us some patience and understanding while we continue to improve in all areas. Respectfully, the High Point Regional Board of Education.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dunn. All right, we'll move on to public comments on agenda items only. If you have comments, step to the podium, state your name and address. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, we will open public comments on agenda items only at this time. Each speaker should state his or her name and address. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board, which will be timed by you. We'll limit this section to no longer than 45 minutes. Please be respectful and mindful that your comments are being recorded. Anyone?
Good Together, 98 Gemma Road, Wantage. I'll keep my comments brief and direct. First, shouldn't have to be mentioned this, but tax rate payers need a very significant reduction in High Point's local tax levy. As of October 2017, High Point student enrollment was 848.5 students, down 552 or 39.44%. High Point could be heading down towards the mid-700 students. I request that I have not received the state numbers for 2018. Based on my very preliminary calculations, Wantage, Mansfield, Buffy, Sussex Borough will probably see a tax increase in High Point this year, even without any tax increase. Are we to assume that under this new proposed contract, the board will be giving every member of the association a $30,683 raise? Why not? They do the work. Prior to the board voting on this proposed contract, is this board going to release to the public the information as received from the state of New Jersey concerning the proposed cuts in state aid to schools while declining student enrollment? And if not, why not? Who prepared this proposed contract with the association? Who prepared Mr. Ripley's obscene new contract? Back in 2014, when I requested a copy of Mr. Ripley's new contract, I was told they had to print it out from Mr. Ripley's computer because that was the only source. Kyle, for years now, I've wondered as to why you treat us, the resident taxpayers of High Point, as trash. Now someone has printed out and given me information that states you are supposedly a pastor, a minister. Kyle, if you're supposedly a pastor, a minister, how is it that you can treat us as trash? The first action this board should take tonight is to immediately repeal, revoke, rescind, cancel Mr. Ripley's obscene new contract and terminate Mr. Ripley. The only other action that should be taken tonight is for Rosalind Lamont, Kyle Bioy, Scott Ripley, James McCusiewicz, the board attorney, plus every member of the High Point board who did not actually vote against Mr. Ripley's obscene new contract to unconditionally resign effective immediately. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Peter Knight from Frankfurt. Since it was brought up at the beginning about the issue about the evaluation of the superintendent, I've lived here in Sussex. Well, I returned back to Sussex 4 years ago, and I have a question. Who's been running the show for 4 years? It's hard for me to believe that any organization, business, not-for-profit should be run and oops, forget to evaluate the person who is ultimately charged in running the organization. I just can't imagine how that was overlooked. The superintendent, I would imagine, I've led organizations, and trust me, I anticipated evaluations, and if I didn't get them, I asked for them. So why didn't the superintendent say, oh, by the way, where was my evaluation? Then, to the point, is how can you give such a raise to somebody who has not been evaluated in 4 years? In real life, you get raises, bonuses, based on performance. How did you determine, as a board, to give such a stupendous increase to somebody who hasn't been evaluated? It's a serious question. I would love to hear some answers.
Anyone else? Move on to presentation. Please remember, this is an agenda item only, folks. You will have a chance to speak on anything else at the end.
Yeah, John, about 29 people were on the audit. I've got a question. I've come to some of these meetings. Whatever you're focused, you never respond back to the audience. Never. I've got the other meeting, other board meeting, Board of Education meeting, where the transparency came out to the people that are paying the salaries. I served in public office. People came to the meeting, we spoke back. And I don't know if this is something for Board of Education, where you don't speak back, you don't tell anybody in it. You sit there, you look at it. I was here a few months ago with Montague. and I was embarrassed. They came up here, they spoke, and you open up, tell us what you feel, please. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Agenda item A. All right, presentations. We'll move on to Board Weiss, Speaker of the House. HPEA, Paul Mancuso, HPEA President, will update us on HPEA item.
Before I yield my time to Mrs. Walton, I would like to make a statement to everybody and to the board, and to thank Mr. Chalamet and the security staff that handled our security incident that occurred just recently. And I would like to ask the people on the security committee to look into what measures can be done with the backpacks, as far as I know other schools in Sussex County do random searches. I mean, these kids are coming in with backpacks that are heavier than myself. And I know they're not just carrying books, so we would ask that of the board. And I appreciate it. And I will yield my time to Mrs. Walton, who is the head of our negotiation. Thank all of you for your service. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening. As Carla said, I am the HPEA Negotiations Chair. My name is Beth Walton. On behalf of our committee and all of the custodians, groundskeepers, maintenance personnel, paraprofessionals, secretaries, teachers, counselors, child study team members, and the computer technician, webmaster, media specialist, and trainer, athletic trainer that we represent, I would like to say how pleased we are that the negotiations process has reached its final step tonight, the board's vote to ratify. The HPEA presented the agreement to our members on January 24th, held a follow-up meeting on January 31st, and then voted on February 1st. Our association voted overwhelmingly to ratify the agreement. After a lengthy process which had its shares of ups and downs, the HPEA is grateful for the support that the board showed our members. And though the rates we settled on was below the county average, we appreciate the fair settlement that we have reached, and the vote that our association took on the matter clearly shows that just shy of a couple of us, we all do feel that way. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Principal's report, Mr. Talman.
Good evening, everybody. How are we doing? I would apologize if I could talk to both sides to kind of bounce back and forth. A couple of things we're just going to give you an update on, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Duke for our Governor's Awards recipients who are over there as well. A couple of school accomplishments and things that are going on in the school. The guidance child study team right now is currently working on the 2019-20 schedule builds that's in full swing, so we're thankful to Mrs. Walton, who's one of the counselors. I don't know if there's any counselors that are here. I don't see anybody right now. Thank you for that. I know that process is tedious as we get to build the schedule for next year. A couple of things of school accomplishment-wise. The mock trial team, I saw George Russell somewhere here as well, Mr. Russell. Mock trial team didn't make it as far as they wanted to. Every year we want to make it as far as we can. This year we lost in the county semis, which is a very, very tough competition. From what we talked about, I think it was maybe down to 1 point that decided that it's going on to the next level. So kudos to our mock trial team for a fantastic season, building for next year as well. Our social media ambassadors, which you hear me talking about a lot. I don't think Mr. Fenlon is here tonight. Yes, you hear Mr. Fenlon in the back. Social media ambassadors, and there's a program that we talk about often what they do for our school. They were invited by Franklin Township to go down, and they sponsored and actually coordinated and presented Indigenous's community event at Franklin Township School, where they were the keynote speakers, and they ran sessions for our parents in the community and for teachers in Franklin Township. So we're very proud of our students actually presenting to adults on digital citizenship and things of that nature. So thank you to Kevin for supporting that. Thank you also to the Frankfurt Board of Education and Administration as well. A couple of congratulations in order to some of our art students. You may have seen this or not. We had a Mount Olive Art Invitational, We had 3 students that were chosen. Elise Keel, first place in photography. Andrea Communion, first place in the category. And Lena Michelle, second place in sculpture. But as part of that second place sculpture, she has the opportunity to attend art school she chooses with a $40,000 academic scholarship. So that is to Monster College of Art up in New York State. So the 3 students as well. Elise Keel, secondly, was also just recognized today. Her photo is going to be one of the 2019 State Youth Art exhibit. That's going to be down in Trenton at the State House. And there's only 2 Sussex County students that were chosen for that award, and Elise was one of them. So Elise's photograph that she created and she designed and she took is going to be on display in the State House for about a week. And then we're going to go down on March 8th and do a nice ceremony for all the high school students and the middle school students. So she's one of the 2 Sussex County students recognized. So congratulations to Elise. I had quite a spectacular week for her, as well also to Mrs. She Nice, our digital photography teacher, who nominated her for that award. Without that nomination, she wouldn't be in the category to be recognized for that. Also, I said thank you to Mr. Gonzalez, who's a construction manufacturing teacher. I don't think he's here tonight. He had a class participation community partnership with Tito Morero from Hprhs Concrete, and he came in and basically showed our students how to work with concrete and the level that they could perform at a concrete competition that's coming up for them. So he took his time out of his days, 2 days out of his own work schedule to come and work with those students. I was in class for a couple hours with them. It was fantastic to see, again, a community member partnering with our classes. I know we've had other people come in and do the same thing as well. So thank you to Tito and his partner with our students. And they're going to do that competition next week, and we'll see what happens. They've created some beautiful designs out of that as well. Amanda Agnew was also in the paper today. There's actually an article in the paper today. Thank you for Commissioner Darrell. I think that's here as well for running that article. We appreciate that great article on the students. Amanda Agnew was also in the paper today. She is going to be the New Jersey State Fair Sussex County Farm Horse Show Ambassador. Again, only 1 of 2 students that were chosen in the county, and Amanda, as one of our seniors, was there as well. Before we go to the governors, can I switch over to athletics, Mr. Good? Is that okay? A little bit of some end-of-year report to give you, so bear with me some patience. The girls basketball is still working hard. Second place in Freedom Division, 8-2 record overall, 14-10 overall. 8-2 record in Division, 14-10 overall. And hosts Kittatinny on the 25th in the first round of state playoffs. Boys basketball, Coach Strell over there. Boys working hard every single day. Beat Lakeland today. And a nice game for the boys. We got Roxbury at coach this week. Thursday as well, so congratulations to the boys team on a good season. Wrestling, 16-3 record overall. Freedom Division champs, North Section 1 Group 2 champs again. I believe that's our 27th sectional title. Overall, we advanced to South Plainfield Group 2 state finals down on Tom's River, which is an exciting event. They had to wrestle at 9 o'clock and then like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and lost to a very good South Plainfield team. Second district tournament last week at Fairlawn. We had quite a few individual champions. Billy Talmadge, Brian Saldana, and Andrew Lewis were first place winners. Second place, Clayton Utter, Devin Needle, Devin Flannery, Sean Wiggin. Third place winners were Josh Kirby and John Morris. All 10 wrestlers that place move on to regions. We're supposed to happen tomorrow night, and now it's going to move to Thursday because of the community ice snow is coming. And also, very exciting, we're very excited to thank you for the support of the board. NJSA sponsored for the first time a all-girls wrestling tournament. And that took place this weekend. We had Red Bank was with the location. We had 2 individuals move on in the tournament. Randy Miley was a junior. She moved on. She's the North Region champion. So that's the first time, obviously, in high school history we've had that opportunity. And Bree Sipsick is a senior. She moved on to the 3rd place finish. So both those female athletes will be moving on to the Atlantic City tournament, which is in 2 weeks. I met with both Randy and Bree this morning, and it's just the excitement is just coming from all over the place. How excited they're already part of this, experience that, and then to have success. Which was pretty cool to see. So congratulations to them as well as moving on to Atlantic City. Bowling advanced to the North B Public Sectional Tournament. Swimming was 3-5 overall for girls and 3-4 for the boys. They advanced to the state playoffs as well. And they lost to the Newton Lincoln Valley combined team. Ice hockey is playing in the state game right now. Tom's River, I haven't heard the update of where they're at. They're in the state playoffs. Unfortunately, traveling down to Tom's River for that playoff game tonight. And they're overall 10-10. Skiing anticipated this Friday, Coach, right, at NJAC?
We're competing tonight,
Yeah.
and they are in the NJAC tournament on Friday, and that'll determine whether the teams go to the state finals. But we already have representation in the state finals individually,
Right.
which is the 22nd year in a row that we've had somebody at the state finals.
great success, right? Even with the season that we've had winter-wise for
What season?
out of our control, right? Allison and Marissa, right, have been placed, I think, pretty much in the top 10 match.
They are,
all
and
season
Zach
long.
Gassman as well.
Yeah, Zach Gassman,
Who's
of course.
fantastic, so.
Congratulations.
More to come.
For a great season. More to come. And that's coming up. Tyra Ringo has the Pass It Along Scout Athlete that's coming up next month. John Kappmeyer is going to be in May, and NJSA Scout Athlete and Athletes of the Week. Allison Manager is talking for skiing, and Zach Catterman for skiing as well. February 12th is Bree Simsick and Randy Bonner for wrestling. So those are the athletic reports. Any questions on the two of those? There's a lot of information. Try to get it fast. Yes, sir.
If I just may mention one thing, Billy Talmadge also won the Outstanding Wrestler for the whole district in the district tournament.
Correct, District 1, yep. And it takes down the last, I think, about 8 seconds, right? After giving him points. That was excited. He was not very excited with today. He was excited when talking about it. Yeah, that's the wrestler, and I think a couple points for the team as well, right? So a lot of information in a short amount of time. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Leduc. Before I do, we have two fine individuals going to represent. I know a lot of fine individuals in this room. Every year, we are going to have two individuals selected that are nominated from the staff. Governor's Educator and Governor's Educator Service Professional Awards of the year. And I can tell you from my personal experience, Mr. Blevins and Mr. Strell, I know this is going to embarrass me a little bit more as well. Coach Strell and I coached for a long period of time together, and I can tell you that there's not a better type of individual, coach, teacher, that you can have. When my kids are here, I want Mr. Strell to be in front of them, teaching them and coaching them, because he's a high caliber individual, high character individual. And just truly proud of him what he does every single day for our kids in the classroom, on the athletic fields, on the basketball court, on the tennis court as well. We're very proud to have him as part of that. Mr. Love, we get a chance to work with on a regular basis for many of our students and supporting our students. And again, I say the same thing. Having an individual like Mr. Blevins around to support our students is it's unbelievable. And what you see on a regular basis of the proactive measures he's able to put in place to help our kids in all types of different challenges that they're facing is truly amazing. So very appreciative of both what you do for our students and for our staff every single day. And before this embarrasses more, I just wanted to say congratulations, very proud of you both. You know that. Mr. Duke.
I get the opportunity to kind of quote what our committee said. So I think the best part about this was when we sat down, I've only been at High Point now since August, and it was hands down, I completely agreed with the committee, and it was to recommend Mr. Schell for Government Teacher of the Year and Ms. Blevins for Education Service Professional. So Mr. Blevins, he's been in education for 26 years. 19 of those have been spent here at High Point. He spent 4 years as an aide in Randolph. Randolph Township Schools, and 3 years at Lebanon Valley. He taught special education, and he became a behaviorist, and he is currently our school crisis and substance use counselor. So I just want to pull a couple quotes from some of the recommendations that were written. And so one says, Mr. Blevins is a lifelong learner who always seeks to hone his skills as an educator and as a counselor for professional development. He's constantly seeking out ways to support his professional growth in order to provide our students with the best possible resources. Another quote that somebody wrote, Mr. Blevins makes it a priority to field calls, emails, texts, and meetings on his own time, showing passion for his job and for the needs of his students. Mr. Blevins' commitment to our students, families, community, and staff is exemplary and deserving of acknowledgement. He exemplifies dedication, commitment, empathy, and compassion far beyond his job description. In doing so, he makes the lives of High Point students better every day. So Mr. Blevins, definitely a tremendous asset to High Point, the High Point community. I've witnessed it myself. We've dealt with situations where I think without Mr. Blevins, I would have been in a panic. He always comes in cool, calm, and collected, and he has a way with the students that we definitely appreciate all he does. So, thank you. Classroom. There's an interesting group of students, and I will say sometimes a couple comments will fly in classrooms where certain teachers are, and he just dealt with it so calmly and so passively, and just what, and I was like, how I need a little bit of that in my life. So I have had the opportunity to observe him, and I'm just going to pull a couple quotes and say a couple things. So Mr. Stroud has been in education for 14 years, all of which have been spent at High Point. He's been a huge asset to the High Point community, from coaching basketball, football, tennis, and to just being a phenomenal special education teacher. He's definitely been a great asset to High Point. A quote, Mr. Stroud is a phenomenal teacher that is able to get down to the student's level and meet their needs. He has a special gift that draws students' attention and can make even the most monotonous tasks in the classroom seem fun and time-worthy. The passion he brings into his profession is unparalleled and continuously gives value to the neediest of students. Another quote, which I was like, wow, this was a good one. They said he's a champion for our kids. And so I couldn't agree more. And the other quote was, he is a quiet strength. So being a special ed teacher, Mr. Stroud has been able to give equity in education and make every day a special experience in his classroom. Mr. Stroud credits his accomplishments here at High Point to his father, who was a teacher for over 30 years, the great teachers that he grew up having and now are his colleagues, and to his passion for sports. So Mr. Stroud is an outstanding role model and community member, and we're proud to call him our 2019 Governor of Education.
Okay, Mr. Campbell, you're up.
Thank you. Good evening. Mr. Blevins, you're a tremendous asset working with at-risk students and providing some valuable support to our students, so thank you and congratulations. Pictured behind me, we're so proud of our wrestling program. When you travel the state of New Jersey, it's an honor to be recognized for something that we're known for such great success. But I want to congratulate those athletes and their families, and it's also tremendous to say young men and young women, as Miley's pictured up there. But I also want to recognize their coaches. This year, the coaching staff took on, I think, 22 young aspiring female wrestlers, and they did it willingly and gladly, and so they're starting a new tradition here. Mr. Johnny Gardner was just named Coach of the Year for the 37th time, probably. But I was just thinking, my first couple of years here, Mr. Gardner and I had the privilege to coach freshman football, and our star tailback was Mr. Strell, taking us back quite a few years. So congratulations, Jesse. We had a chance to, he was my point guard, then he was my assistant, and I was his assistant, and wonderful young man and educator. So congratulations. We have state assessments to discuss, and I'm very pleased to announce that the state is, if you've read the paper, you know they're all over the map on where they're at with assessments. However, they are condensing them. The park assessment will be shorter, test units will be fewer in minutes, and the number of days where learning will be disrupted went from 6 to 3 last year, and it will go from 3 to 2 this year. So we will be testing students in park May 21st, May 22nd, but we're really quite pleased that we have 2 days that are disrupted by park, and we believe that our students and our staff will rise to that challenge and that it will be particularly manageable, so we're pleased about that. Tomorrow morning, we have a class meeting for all of our 11th grade students, and we're excited to tell them about some increased opportunities for senior enrichment. We have students doing these things right now, but we believe we have some flexibility and some creativity that will expand these opportunities. Our staff and our guidance counselors and members of the community have told us that our students need more engagement. They need more at 18 or 19 college and career enrichment outside of school. We have students right now that are taking courses at SCCC. Mrs. Walton is here. She's been a driving force in supporting our students who want to begin their college studies. We've had interns this year, and we hope that that number of intern experiences increases next year. We have a new pre-apprenticeship program where certain businesses have come in and targeted certain parts of our curriculum where they believe our students can serve in a kind of hybrid experience where they go to class in the morning and a handful of them may be able to participate in a work experience in the afternoon. And likewise, our co-op program, our work study program, we are taking a great deal of the restrictions off of that program because we believe that the bureaucratic requirements for what students do when they leave here and go to work have become too onerous. And we want to see the number of students who do that double or triple. This year, I believe we have 19 students that participate in our work-study co-op program. We'd love to see that at some point double. And so we're providing more opportunities for our seniors and creative opportunities. In-house internships, out-of-house externships. We want the experience of the fourth year of high school to be meaningful, and we want to increase opportunities for them to explore that. So depending upon the weather, we'll be meeting with the juniors tomorrow and explaining a considerable amount of that to them. As I mentioned before the board on several occasions, we've contracted with Lincoln this year. Every single student at High Point took a language arts benchmark assessment in September. The Lincoln benchmark assessments we administer are really the way that PART was originally intended to be. Take an assessment in your classroom with your teacher, a little bit less stress, a little bit more of a healthy educational environment, and then assess that student 2 or 3 other times throughout the year to measure growth. Now, a board goal for this year and a district goal for this year is to increase our use of data. And after having taken the second benchmark assessment, we have a tremendous amount of data. Looking at students who took a test in September and then took a test in January, we can now look at the performance of students measured according to the same standards and skills, and we can look at an entire grade. How did our sophomores do? We can look at one in particular class. How did a teacher's fourth period class grow and improve? We can look whole school per standard. We can look at each individual students, and each teacher is right now in the process of evaluating how their specific students did. Did their students show growth between September and January? For example, our sophomores did incredibly well. In September, they had a 40, tough reading back there, 46, help me out, Mr. Franklin. 40% proficiency rate on this assessment. Keep in mind, this is not an assessment like the one you would give in class where 80 is a B and 90 is an A. It's a benchmark. It's got a normed measurement that is not related to 80, 90, etc. 40% was the 10th grade snapshot in September. 52% was the snapshot in January. That shows tremendous growth. Every single teacher in the building emphasized literacy, tried to increase activities focused on critical reading, and growth was measurable and to be applauded. On Lincoln, you can also go in and look at the questions the students took, and you can see every single question. Who got it right? Who got it wrong? What standard was it assessing? And it's a very powerful tool. By standard. Right now, we're asking every teacher to go into Lincoln and to pull up their students and to see how their specific students did. Green is the first test, orange is the second test. You've had them for 4 or 5 months. What is the growth per standard? And where can we improve? And where can we recognize growth and have teachers collaborate and enable each other to learn from one another? If you look at standards, you can look at one particular standard that was assessed. A teacher can click on it, they can then see the score for every single student in their class, which allows you to easily do this. If I know that I'm a history teacher and I particularly want to see my students improve at determining the author's point of view and finding evidence to support that. It's a pretty basic key skill that many students still struggle to master. I can go in and I can look at my particular class and I can group students, low, medium, high. I can make 4 groups, 5 groups, 2 groups, and I can hopefully target them with more activities or with remediation to help all students show growth, okay? It's not a summative assessment of this is the end and this is what you learn. It's progress monitoring with the use of data based on standards, trying to make sure growth is occurring. We have several guests here this evening. Whenever I speak publicly, I ask the community to follow our social media imprint. Mr. Fenlon and his social media ambassadors are really the driving force behind this. I believe you get to see a day in the life of High Point, a week in the life of High Point, in a colorful, creative perspective, and most often, it's from the perspective of our students. So something exciting happens in class, and our students tweet it out. Those are our students that went to Frankfurt 2 weeks ago, and our high school students hosted a community event that was outstanding.
Pose for a better shot.
You gotta speak up, Kevin.
Those are our students. They're fantastic, and every day they put out there on social media what's going on from their lens and in their eyes. Ms. Leduc, Mr. Talame is here. We have such creativity. It's a privilege to be able to work with young people because they are funny and they're creative and they have no shame and they like to try and embarrass us a little bit. So as some schools have done, we have a very creative schools closed video. I hope you make a few more. The creativity that comes out of our media program is really is fun to watch. So that was great. Socratic seminar. I threw a little wrestling singlet on Socrates there. I thought that was appropriate. He's pretty popular in these parts. I would say as good as any lesson I observe on a regular basis is when our classrooms, in particular in the humanities, conduct a Socratic seminar. When I was in the classroom, I thought I was good at provoking students and getting them to think and having class debates. What our teachers are doing right now is far better than that. Their class discussions are structured. They require that students read, synthesize information, and they can only share in the class discussion if they've read the material and they have a factual point to comment on. In the Socratic seminar, you'll often see 8 or 9 students in an inner circle, and they're debating, and on the outer circle, you'll see 10 or 15 students scoring them. Then often they'll take a break, and the coaches on the outer ring have to go in and give the students on the inner ring advice on what comments they made were productive. It's a structured, rigorous, outstanding practice that so many of our teachers are conducting. I observed 2 science classes today. Both of them took me on a field trip. Mr. Baker took me on a trip out to the dumpsters because his students are campaigning to dispel the myth that High Point doesn't recycle. So we went out and saw 4 dumpsters. They were empty because it was Tuesday after a holiday weekend, but these students are waging a campaign to show the rest of the community that we do recycle and how we recycle. Then in the afternoon, I went in to see Mr. Weiss. His students went out and collected snow, and they were doing a lab experiment testing the acidity of snow versus water. So our science department has become increasingly hands-on, and the learning that goes on there is really, really exciting. This is one of the best school-wide events. I'm a big fan of the communal activity. I don't know if there's been a pep rally event that was as well received by our students as this was. So hats off to Ms. Leduc and Mr. Van Orden. We had a few games, musical chairs, tug of war, and then the staff and the faculty squared off in a basketball game, and it was great. Sometimes we have pep rallies and there are students that might not be enthusiastic, but the whole entire school was excited, and then we capped it off that night with an evening event which drew a huge crowd, and it really was a great event. We have a gold medalist at the Olympics over at Skylands, so we're very excited that our students at all different levels of athletics are able to compete and succeed. And as Mr. Talame mentioned, our art students they need their own trophy case. They're winning recognition constantly, and we're so proud of them and of their teachers. just a young woman excited about women in literature. And these are the things that the kids choose to promote about their daily experience. Creation. This is what I see when I go into classrooms. I believe the image of high school classrooms in 1970s and 1980s was a lot of stand and deliver, a lot of focus on content, which is still important, but you see our students creating and our teachers creating an atmosphere where creativity and making something is a daily part of our classrooms. In math class, it's hands-on, they're active, they're engaged. Tito Marrero, I haven't seen him since he was a senior here at High Point. Thrilled that he came in and worked with our students. They're getting real-world experience from a professional from the community. And there's our best and brightest of recent. We do really a wonderful job recognizing students, different types of students for different types of accomplishments. So thank you to our staff. Staff puts a lot of thought into that. There's a tremendous amount of passion about who wins this award. So to our students of the marking period, congratulations. And if you haven't, please go online on a regular basis and see what we're all about. And again, you'll see it from the eyes of the student, which is very special.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business? All right, action items, curriculum instruction, Mrs. Anderson.
Okay, curriculum and instruction, we received the first 3 reports, faculty attendance, student attendance, and suspension reports. And then I'm going to move items 4 through 10. 4 is approving the harassment, intimidation, and bullying report for January through February. 5 is approving the curricular and student activities field trips as listed. 6 is approving the professional development activities as listed. 7 is approving the dates for the extended school year program this summer. 8 is approving the youth advocate program that will be happening at no cost to the board. 9 is to approve the revisions of the Uniform State Memorandum of Agreement between education and law enforcement officials and the Article 12 annual review. And 10 is to approve enrollment of 6 choice school students that are coming to High Point for next year. Moving items 4 through 10.
Second.
Any questions? Roll call?
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mr. John?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Radcliffe?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Carver?
Yes.
Mr. Beely?
Yes. Personnel, Mr. Dunn.
Under personnel, I'd like to move items 1 through 3 together. Item 1 is a recommendation to approve extended sick FMLA leave of absence, employee 1198. Item 2, a recommendation to appoint Ms. Lori Kaufman for the position of Executive Administrative Assistant to the Superintendent. And item 3 is a recommendation to approve the appointment of Ashley Swords as a home instruction tutor as listed. I'll make the motion, seeking a second.
Second.
Any discussion on items 1 through 3 in personnel? Roll call, please.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Radcliffe?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Carver?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Beely?
Yes. Extracurricular, I'll group items 1 through 5 together. Number 1, recommended that we accept the resignation of Chandler Howard as the assistant softball coach. Number 2, recommended by the superintendent that we approve Howard Chandler as a volunteer coach assistant for the softball team, effective immediately for the 18-19 school year. Number 3, recommended by the superintendent of the Board of Education to approve the June 25th, 27th, 28th, and August 1st, 2019 hours of 8 a.m. to 1:30 as the dates for the school year physicals. recommended by the superintendent that we approve the following extracurricular appointments as listed. And number 5, which is actually number 4 again, I'll tell you that. Recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approves the overnight trip for the wrestling team to attend the state tournament on February 28th and March 1st in Atlantic City. And the reimbursements will be as listed there. I need a motion.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on item 1 through 5? Roll call.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Rancliffe?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Keimer?
Yes.
Mr. Donner?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mr. Beely?
Yes. Okay, policy. We don't have anything before us, but Mr. Dunn, I believe we have a ton of policies coming up, am I correct?
That's what you understand.
Something like that? Some?
They will, it is anticipated that we will have policies on the next agenda.
Negotiations. Number 1, be it resolved that the board approve the memorandum of agreement between the board and the High Point Association, Education Association, the HPEA, for the period July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2021, which was ratified by the HPEA on February 1st, 2019. And be it further resolved that the board authorizes the board attorney to prepare the collective bargaining agreement in accordance with the memorandum of agreement, and for the board president to execute the final agreement on behalf of the board. I need a motion. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I'd like to be the first to say, since being on the negotiations team, thank you for your professionalism, and it shows what can happen when we get into a room together with intent. Carla, thank you. Beth, thank you, your entire negotiations team. That was a wonderful thing that we did, and we came out with something that we can both be happy with. So, I think that anything else? All right, roll call.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Rancliffe?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Abstain.
Mrs. Keimer?
Yes.
Mr. Donner?
Abstain.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Beely?
Yes. Buildings and grounds. Did you guys have any?
No.
No?
We didn't meet because of the weather.
Yeah,
so-
did you have anything that you all right. So then we will move on to finance. I need to group items 1 through 10 together. Number 1 is recommended by that the board accept the report of the board secretary and business administrator, attachment G1. Number 2, recommended that we accept the report of the treasurer for the month of January 2019, attachment G2. Recommended that we approve the report of transfers and minimum expense transfer report for January, attachment G3A and G3B. Recommended that the board approve the payment of the attached schedule of audited bills dated February 19th and attachment G4. Number 5, recommended that the board accept the agency account, adult education, athletic account, cafeteria account, principal petty cash, school store and student accounts for January 2019, attachment G5. 6, recommended that the board approve the contract between the Union County Ed Services Commission and High Point Regional High School for the information listed. Number 7, recommended that the board accept and approve and place on file the comprehensive annual financial report, which is the audit and corrective action plan for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. That's an attachment G8. Number 8, recommended that the board approve the vendor payments for the spring musical to the individuals as listed. Number 9, recommended by the superintendent of the Board of Education approve the following annual certified cost per pupil for tuition adjustment purposes for the 17-18 school year. And number 10, recommended that the Board of Education accept a grant from Educational Testing Services in the amount of $3,000 for participation in a pilot assessment related to Next Generation Science Standard, the NGSS. I need a motion.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion on 1 through 10?
Mr. Rancliffe?
Yes.
Mrs. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Keimer?
Yes.
Ms. Donner?
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Beely?
Yes. Transportation, Ms. Anderson.
Very thrilling and exciting approval of buses. I'm going to move items 1 through 4. 1 is a joint transportation agreement for this year. 2 is a joint transportation agreement for a special education route for this school year. 3 is a joint transportation agreement for a shared trip for this school year. And 4 is a list of quoted contracts for athletics and activities trips for this school year. Moving items 1 through 4, I need a second.
Second.
Do we have any questions about all these buses? Okay. Roll call.
Mrs. Anderson,
Yes.
Ms. Carver,
Yes.
Mr. Donna,
Yes.
Mr. Kehoe,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Inkwood,
Yes.
Mr. Neely.
Yes. We don't have any correspondence before us. Miscellaneous, Mr. Dunn, you have something to present.
Yes. I'm gonna
See what?
try to go forward, yeah, and then maybe
You better go for it.
you may have to turn away. See how it grabs them up. Oh, you got a cover slide for me. So I made some comments and decisions at the January meeting that were based on the data that, as I understood it then. And I asked the chair for some time to present some further elaboration of that data in hopes of maybe dispelling some misinformation. And it's actually a pleasure to have a room full of people because quite honestly, we have single digits of public attendance in most of our meetings. So welcome all. So when I said to my wife that I might be presenting something tonight, she's like, why do you want to put yourself out there like that? And then my daughter chimes in, she says, you know they're calling you a snake online and worse, don't you? And while that's not really the kind of things that I like to hear from my children, especially for a job that I don't get paid for and put a lot of hours in, my only response was that I can't do anything about the small-minded people in our community that want to name call and hide behind social media posts and things of that sort. I have a personal belief that the majority of the people in our community are hardworking taxpayers who just want to see their money spent wisely, educating our youth, and they don't really have a deeper agenda than that, okay? So, if you truly came here tonight to, hoping to get some answers, I think it was mentioned earlier, I'm hoping that some of the data that I present tonight will help you get those answers. Maybe it won't, I can't tell. But I'm still asking that you please give me the respect in my attempt to provide you with the answers to the data as I understand it. The alternative is I just walk back up there and we don't say anything, and I don't think that's the transparency that people in this community deserve. So, as a board member, I'm privy to a lot of sensitive information that I can't legally or ethically disclose. What I'm going to present tonight is entirely from sources that are publicly available. In fact, I guess we can't quite see it, but I can give it to you. There are links to the Department of Education website where all of this information has come from and been distilled. It took a fair amount of time to pull data out and turn it into graphs so that I can present it in something that is a visible graphical format that I'm hoping people can understand. But again, it's all available for public consumption. And with that, I'll start with the first slide. Is there anybody that can't see this from the far corners of the room? First slide, I don't think is a surprise to anybody. This is the student enrollment. I chose a period of 5 years. Why 5? The data was available online in the same format. Everything is consistent for the 5 years for the other schools that I'm choosing to compare against. Look, I could have gone further, I could have gone shorter. It is what it is.
1999.
So, again, 5 years, starting with 2012, 2013. The interesting thing is, I believe that is all under Dr. Ripley's tenure, or thereabouts.
Yes, sir.
So if we start with High Point, we had a reduction of about 118 students. That's a minus 11% figure in those 5 years. Look, I just chose schools here that are our sending districts. I have another slide where I compare against some other high schools. We can pull as many other schools comparatively in as you want. This was just limited by my time and my resources. Again, this was all put together from data I pulled and assembled. Looking at the other schools, we had a reduction in Sussex Wantage of 279 students approximately, which is roughly 20%. Frankfurt, interestingly, was the only school in our area, or of our sending districts, that had an increase of students of about 2%. And Lafayette had a reduction of 27 students, the same minus 11% that is High Point. And you can see as they're set how many students, absolute number of students are there. That's the student enrollment, okay? What's the important piece of data that I think everybody wants to get to? How does it affect the tax levy? Okay? Same 5 years. Now it looks like it was cut off. I have to specify 2017, 2018 is a budgeted amount. We haven't finished closing the books. Things could change for any of those schools. But as it was projected, High Point, over that course of time, has reduced the tax levy $1.7 million. Not only has it reduced $1.7 million, it has never increased over those 5 years. In fact, of the 5 years, there's only one where it held steady. The other 4 were reductions. Important note. Do you remember the figure of reduction in students from the first slide? Minus 11%? Minus 11% reduction in tax levy over those 5 years. I recognize some faces that are former members or current members of boards of ed in our sending districts here. I'm not my intention to point out anything other than what the data show here. But Sussex Wantage had an increased tax levy over that time of approximately 1%, and actually increased during 3, I believe, of those 5 years. Frankfurt had an increase of 210,000, or approximately 3%. Okay, if we look at that versus their increase in number of students, kudos to Frankfurt. Lafayette, increase of about the same, $210,000 for a 6% increase in their tax levy. Look, they're way down the scale on the absolute value of tax levy for their district, but 6% increase in their tax levy when they had a negative 11% reduction in students. I didn't talk about Sussex Wantage exactly, but please allow me. Tax levy more or less flat across those 5 years. All right, 1%, okay? But when you compare that to a 20% reduction in the number of students, I'm sorry, your pencils just weren't as sharp in Sussex Wantage as they were at High Point. So, if I can leave with anything here before I move on, $1.7 million reduced in 5 years to your tax levy. If you live in Sussex Borough, Wantage Township, Frankfurt Township, Branchville Borough, Lafayette Township, if your taxes increased over the last 5 years, it's not because of this board. Municipalities increased their tax levy, the county increased their tax levy, some of the other sending districts increased their tax levy. We're really sharpening our pencils here to achieve a continual reduction or flat tax levy. Okay, so that's our sending districts. They're elementary schools. Maybe you can ask or say that that's not comparable data. So let's compare against some high schools, adjacent high schools or overlapping high schools. I just picked 3. There could have been any others in the county or outside the county. Let's look at Kittatinny, where there was a reduction in students of 82, about 7%. Not as bad as High Point. Vernon, I put Vernon in here primarily because they were in the news about a week and a half ago with a presentation that they had done. The number is much larger in reduction if I were to go out a number of years. Again, over the course of this 5 years, it's only a reduction of 15%. They had a tremendous student population in Vernon, and their reduction, at least in the last 5 years, was only 15%.
13 to 12.
So, Sussex County Vocational School is curious in that they had an increase of 81 students. 81 students more attend Sussex County Vocational rather than prior to the beginning of the period at 2012-2013. A little bit more on that later. So again, student population declining pretty much everywhere. There's a few outliers where the population grows. Tax levy. I've already presented High Points. Kittatinny, in the same period of time where their student population was reduced 82 students, not once did they decrease a tax levy. They increased every year for the last 5 years to the tune of $1.1 million. I don't know that I've read much about Kittatinny's problems, other than maybe some the teachers' issue there. But as far as the tax levy, that doesn't happen to get mentioned. Vernon, admirable in their total amount of reduction, $3.57 million reduction. But it was only 9% of their total relative to 15% reduction in their student population. Campbell. So, I'm going to have to go off my readings. Thank you for your patience. Yes, that one. Do I fit anything here? So, clearly, if we look at Sussex County Vocational, there's something, they're playing by different rules. They were able to increase their student population by 81 students. Their tax levy was a modest increase. You know, there's something there. I don't know what it is. It's in there for comparative information. But it's curious because I think if you bring me to my last slide, Campbell. That's, yeah, we can zoom in on that. This is busy, and I'll try to explain it. So this is the superintendent salaries. Their base plus their allowance, the data pulled from the friendly budgets from the New Jersey Department of Education for all of the schools that we looked at prior. And I'm sorry I couldn't get names in there, it got way too busy. But if we look at the rightmost current 2017-2018, the highest line is Sussex County Vocational. I believe that contract was just renewed. And the number of students at Sussex Vocational was way down below High Points. The next one is Vernon Township. Yeah, it's a larger district. It is K through 12. That's not reflective of the replacement of superintendent there, because there were, I think, a couple of them in between. And I attempted to show where there were interims that were placed. And sometimes the interims, they account for those steep drops that you see in the other schools. But as we're coming down from the top, all right, so Sussex County Vocational, Vernon, the next one is Kittatinny. The Kittatinny superintendent is the third highest paid in this particular subset of data. The next one is High Point. And then very close to that, Sussex Wantage, Frankfurt, and on the bottom, Lafayette. I'm not sure what you can take from this, to be quite honest. You know, but here's the challenges in trying to take data and make decisions from them, is because this doesn't mean what the tax levy is. That's my point. Is you can look at this, High Point's superintendent salary, middle of the road. It's not an outlier above, below. You know, you can argue potentially where it is at with increases, but it's not relative to the tax levy. The tax levy is what boards of education vote on to pass along to the community. I'll just end my comments with 1.7 million reduction in tax levy in 5 years. And
There'll be a chance for public comment.
thank you.
If you show his new salaries, it's up by the
And we'll move on to public comments. The same rules apply. This is on anything according to the Open Public Meeting Act. We're looking for public comments. At this time, each speaker should state his or her name and address. They'll have 3 minutes to address the board. We'll limit this section no longer than 45 minutes. Please be respectful and mindful of the comments being recorded. I will add a personal attacks, given the comments that have been made out there that Mr. Dunn had referenced. There will be no personal attacks here tonight. If you begin to do so, you will be taken out. So, that being said, go ahead.
My name is Sarah Moss. I'm from Frankfurt, New Jersey. I'm a graduate of High Point High School, and it's really sad to be an alumni today. And I'm also a future parent of a High Point student, or maybe somewhere else. Well, that will depend on what happens here. Regarding evaluations, is it that you can't find or didn't get completed? Said no teacher ever. Where's the accountability? No teacher would ever be allowed to not hand in an evaluation, not complete their paperwork. It's no excuse, and it doesn't matter what you said or what you looked up. How does this board justify giving Mr. Ripley a 22% yearly increase? It's not only unfathomable in the face of impending cuts in state aid, declining enrollment, and an already overburdened tax levy, but it is also a slap in the face to every taxpayer and stakeholder in the High Point Setting District. How is it that this Board of Education can find money to give Mr. Ripley an outrageous raise, yet can't afford to have proper nursing coverage in his own building and had to close school one day? As a teacher, I'm appalled, and I'm also appalled by the teachers that would vote for something like this. This must be the case, as one of your board members felt so compelled to represent at the High Point BOE as a recent Sussex Wantage Chamber of Commerce meeting criticizing the Sussex Wantage District for providing the needed nursing services. Perhaps people in glass houses should not throw stones. And as far as the presentation is concerned, it doesn't, this is all the past. It doesn't show the future. So if you were to put a line graph up there, our line would go from here to here. What's that do for your tax levy, Mr. Dunn?
Look at number 98, Gamble Road, Warren. Could we put the slide back up that shows the reductions of students in High Point? If I saw the slide correctly, it says from 2012 to 2013 to 2017 to 18, High Point saw a reduction of 118 students. using data I got from the state of New Jersey, 2012 to 2013, you had 1,993.5 students. 17-18, you had 873.5. That's a reduction of 220 students, not 120 students. Somebody better check your data. You might want to check where you got your facts from, Wayne. I have it directly from the New Jersey Department of Education.
That's exactly where my information came from.
Well, you better get it checked, because it's, your information's wrong, and you presented it to the
Your
public.
opinion,
No, directly from the state records.
pulled it straight off the website.
Same crap you pulled at the consolidation.
Hi, my name is Hprhs, 63 Fox Hill Road. I'm in Frankfurt. I'm also a board member of the Board of Education in Frankfurt. Thank you very much for your presentation. I do have a comment. One of the numbers is wrong. We have not had an increase in population. I've been on the board for the past 4 years, and we've had a drop. So I just need to clarify, our district has not had a 2% increase in population. And I had a question. Can you just read that little statement regarding your QSAP that you did at the beginning of the board meeting? I just wanted to make sure I heard something correct.
Frankfurt was the other school in the county
Okay,
that
you
received
said that
the
this
last.
was the only school in Sussex County.
There were 2 schools, the other being Frankfurt.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that you were not the only school. Frankfurt probably also had a wait for 2 QSAP. Then I have a question being on the board. Do you guys do your annual board evaluation? I'm just wondering that too, because again, that is part of your responsibility. What happened with your evaluation with the superintendent, that I don't care, I just want to make sure that you have to evaluate yourself, so that is your job as our representative for our town. So I just want to make it very clear that I sure hope that it is done. Thank you.
Sharon Richard, 1 Matthew Drive, Wantage. The public is beginning to catch on to the fact that some of the very people sitting up here on this board and who are responsible for evaluating the superintendent's performance, setting his salary, and approving merit pay bonus for him, have some very cozy relationships with him. Mr. Morangi, who's not here tonight, has been catching most of the flack for voting in one of his first official acts as a new board member to award a big pay increase to his good friend, Dr. Ripley, after they had dinner together at Mount Fuji Steakhouse recently. But there are 4 other board members up here who also voted to do so. And it is high time that the rest of you come clean about whether or not you have any conflict in relationships with us. I am not mentioning any names just yet, but if you think I'm talking about you, I probably am. I do, however, want to draw attention to one particular issue, and it all has been documented in your board meetings. I guess I'll omit the name because I don't want this to be taken that I'm personally attacking somebody. In June 2014, this person resigned from the board because her daughter was applying for a teaching job in district. In 2014, this same person's daughter was hired based on a recommendation of her friend and former colleague, Dr. Ripley, at the salary of over $60,000, in a decision that somehow was allowed to stand even though only 4 members of the 9-member board voted for it. In August 2014, she got herself reinstated on the board seat from which she resigned 2 months earlier. And in September 2014, she, in violation of Board Member Code of Ethics, voted to approve a contract extension and pay increase for her daughter's boss, Dr. Ripley. This is a board that has spent thousands of dollars each year sending its board members to Atlantic City for ethic training. So she knew she wasn't supposed to do this, but yet she did it anyway. Nothing dodgy or shady here. I'm sure she will tell us that she didn't vote for Dr. Ripley's latest contract as she has suddenly got religious and decided to do the right thing. But some of us would still like to know, how many times has she been in the room making her presence known to the rest of this board why Dr. Ripley's contract was being discussed? How is it that she's able to continue weighing in and voting on personal actions and voted as recently as last September and again in November to award additional merit pay to Dr. Ripley? At last month's meeting, she, who sat on the board for the last 6 years and was its vice president for the
Mrs.
last...
Richard, please wrap this up. You have 3 minutes of the room.
Well, now you took time away from me, Mr.
I didn't take time.
I'm not going to
Your time
argue
is
this.
up.
For 3 of these years admitted
All
that
right,
she...
thank you. Have a seat. Whoever's next, come on up.
Why is
You're
she
not-
cut off? She
Let
paid
her
her
speak.
This is the rules of the board. We're not changing them. I've already stated that.
Mr. President.
You
Well, I'm
need to
next.
rule.
Here we go. Mine has nothing to do with any of this. Mine has to do with the security, because my son's coming up here next year. Yeah, I'll try to a fast speaker anyway, but I'll keep talking, believe me, over you. I have a son moving up here in my point next year.
Excuse me, your name and address?
Andrew Simons, Wantage, New Jersey. I can't help but find myself very uncomfortable with the security situation in this school. Recently, as many of us are aware, the head of security was on a surveillance video at a Montague woman's home during school hours, not following school protocol, with 2 other parties, not even identifying himself, without 2 other parties, I'm sorry. And according to school protocol, as everyone was told to inquire, there was supposed to be 2 people with this person when he was visiting, if it was supposedly a truancy call. However, the person he was visiting didn't even have a child in the school, so no one even knows the reason for the visit. But anyway, the other reason is, who's heading security on the campus if the head of security is allowed to run rampant all day long? What if, God forbid, there's an emergency and we all have this false sense of security and it's not even here? In fact, just last week there was an incident in the school involving a gun on a student in a building. I cannot for any reason imagine why there was not a lockdown or shelter in place. What if the student was carrying a real gun, not a BB gun? And what if there were more parties involved? What if? There were a lot of what ifs there. Sussex Wantage has gone into lockdown and shelter in place for threats not even inside the building, just in surrounding areas. But I would like to know if the head of security was even on campus the day of the gun scare. If so, why was there no lockdown or shelter in place? Just Google BB gun in school and you will see there are countless districts who all went into lockdown mode when something like this happened. Why were we not here? And if the head of security was not here, again, then why are we paying him a full-time salary? A couple years back, under the same head of security supervision, an incoherent man was able to enter the building not once but twice making bomb threats. He was even arrested for the incident, so we know it took place. And these are just the incidents I know of without even having a child in this building yet. Now I also understand we have state troopers in the building here every day, which makes me feel a lot better. However, I just can't understand the point of employing a full-time head of security, given the incidents I just mentioned, coupled with the facts that High Point has offered his shared security services to Sussex Wantage, which has 3 buildings of its own. How can his position warrant a full-time salary here if he has the time to secure 3 additional buildings? This head of security touts to run a security consulting business in addition to his title here at High Point. Why wouldn't High Point just use him on an as-needed basis through his consulting services as they would, for example, an architectural service? In a time when school budgets are suffering, we're throwing away a full-time salary which has proven undeserving and by the generous offerings of his free services, completely unnecessary. New Jersey. I was asked to finish Mrs. Uchida's skill that she has. Most recently, Mrs. Anderson, who went along with layoffs over the last 2 years, none of which involved her daughter, of course, that resulted in the school's nursing staff being reduced to a single nurse for a school for over 900 students. Went before the Sussex Wantage Chamber of Commerce and tried to put the blame on Sussex Wantage School District for not giving High Point one of their nurses and thus forcing High Point to close early because High Point's own nurse wasn't in that day. It's amazing that this board, which claims to have no money for a nurse, has no problem finding money to put in Mr. Ripley's pocket and to his $200 a month phone bill and $100 a month home internet bill. Well, the public is fed up and we want answers. How many times has Mrs. Anderson sat in the room while Dr. Ripley's contract and salary terms were being discussed? Also, did Dr. Ripley foot the bill for his Mount Fuji Steakhouse dinner with Mr. Morangi? If so, how many other board members has Mr. Ripley wined and dined and done favors for or gotten their kids jobs in order to get what he wanted? Did Mr. Ripley force the district to reimburse him for any of this? And finally, is it true that a certain board member is a godparent of Dr. Ripley's kids, or vice versa? Tell us the truth, Mr. Bealey. Inquiring minds want to know.
Next.
Mrs. Flynn, how are you? Dan Flynn, Sussex Borough. I also wanted to address the same Chamber of Commerce meeting where it was brought up by numerous people in the community that Mrs. Anderson was talking about the nursing services in Sussex Wantage. And as a school nurse in Sussex Wantage, I don't understand how she could say that we could only have one nurse for all 3 buildings. The 6 diabetic parents in our district would like to speak to her as to why she feels she can make these decisions that are affecting their children. Our school has high medical needs and requires a nurse in every building, I can assure you of that. And if you want to talk about it some more, I would love to do it. Thank you.
Can I take a quick turn? I'm Mrs. Anderson. This nurse thing, let me be very clear as to what happened. I've got a meeting at Chamber tomorrow morning. I'm going to say, what the heck? Tammy Horsfield is the president of the Chamber. I get to attend the Sussex Wantage Chamber breakfast once a month, and I report on school things. Tammy brought up the fact that she is organizing some kind of cooperative that deals with school nurses, transportation, bus drivers, and I think there was one other, I can't remember. These are positions that are very difficult to fill in the schools. And they're trying to figure out a way to do this. And I said, you know what, that's true. It's so difficult to fill these positions. I said, you all know, there are probably 15 people sitting around Friendly's having eggs and coffee. So you guys all saw the article in the Herald where we had to shut down one day because we didn't have a nurse in the building. And when we went to Atlantic City in October, I spoke to a gentleman who runs a service. He has a service to sell to any school that wants it, that he can find substitute of any kind, including nurses. And I said, you can get school nurses for us? He goes, yeah. So we started talking about the fact of what happened at High Point. And he said, oh, he said, we can get you an LPN. I said, no, we need a school certified nurse. He goes, no, you don't. You only need that. You only need to have one of those in your district. Then you can staff the rest of your district with non-school certified nurses. This is what this man told us, and then we checked up on this. I don't know. This is what this man told us. So I said, you know what? We are up in Sussex County. We are many one-building districts. Sussex Wantage is a 3-building district. And I said, and in the past, they had talked to us about helping us out, sending one. Vernon, one time, we lost our school nurse, and our school nurse is dedicated. She's dedicated. She's here all the time. Right now, I think she's out on a medical leave, and God bless her. But she does not miss days. We had to send nurses out, and Pam, you know, we had to send nurses out on field trips with kids. All the red tape with nurses is amazing. I would never, ever denigrate the job that school nurses do, nor say that it's not important, nor say that we don't need you. But you guys are amazing. We've had LPNs in our school, we've had lots of things, but getting back to the conversation at the chamber breakfast over my coffee and my eggs, I'm astounded because I was in full support of the fact that school nursing is a huge problem for the schools in Sussex County. Single district buildings, single building districts. Lafayette is one, Frankfurt is one. We are a single building. The Frieden, Stillwater, they're all single building districts. They need to have their very own nurse, school certified nurse. And I said, it would be great, I said this to Tammy Horsfield and the 15 people at the table, it would be great if we could figure out a way to make this work for these single building districts. And if that means going to the legislators and saying, you got to fix this rule because we need to have a way that maybe on a given day, it's okay not to have a school certified nurse, as long as our school certified nurse has done all the documentation for the students in the building, they've done all the files, they've done all that stuff, Pamplin, that you do so well in your building for your students. If that file is in place and the law gets changed that on any given day, we could have a substitute fully certified nurse, just not school certified because we can't find them. They could come in that day and take good care of our students, those students that cut themselves or throw up or need to go home or whatever happens to them that day. But overall, you need school certified nurses because the paperwork, the management is huge to run a school health office. That's what happened that morning. And tomorrow morning when I go back, I'm going to mention the fact that this is, oh, is that my 3 minutes? Bye. Oh, okay. Somebody's in this one. Anyway, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to explain.
Thank you, Debbie.
I guess they don't read to the manifest, they can't. That's exactly
Hello again, Pointer Night, Team White Road, Frankfurt. I'm going to meander a little bit, but first something pleasant. As an old broken down wrestler, I want to give a shout out and kudos to our outstanding wrestlers, both men and women. They did a great job. I remember as a wrestler in Bergen County and Hprhs, when we had to come to North Jersey, we were particularly fearful of the heavier weights because we all thought the kids up here pulled plows behind them, and they were awful tough teams. But enough of that. I'd like to circle back a little bit about the issue about the significant pay raise to the superintendent. I'm a strong advocate of teachers. I have many teachers in my family. I give great credit to my teachers. And if I were a teacher or a parent of a teacher, knowing the tough times to get compensated properly, for a teacher to see that the superintendent is getting 20% increases, year after year, 10%, 5%, 5%, it's got to be very discouraging. I'd rather see even a small additional percentage to each teacher than such exorbitant increases. There's a red flag that I learned tonight here, which should be a concern to everybody. Mr. Kehoe questioned about the recording of minutes. There was dead silence, essentially. I wonder what kind of circumstance would it be to excuse the secretary for the recording of the minutes for 2 meetings? You know, what happened? What transpired? It's a big red flag. Certainly, it makes me wonder, you know, what went on? And apparently there was no attempt to fill the gap. So that's what I wanted to say. Again, I think that teachers, as we learned tonight, have done some remarkable things in our system, which I'm extremely proud of. I know my neighbors are. I know several teachers here. They're committed. They spend money out of their pockets. And I just think it needs to be said that, you know, it's tough to see management getting those kind of increases without even getting appraisals. Thank you.
The 2 instances referenced where Mr. Minkowitz chose to excuse himself because the board was evaluating me and discussing my future employment at High Point, and I was removed from the room, and so Mr. Minkowitz chose to excuse himself. That's what was going on in those 2 instances.
Why? What secretary?
I just said he chose to excuse
I'm
himself.
questioning why, he's the board secretary.
Have a comment, comes in with the mic and make a comment.
And Dr. Ripley, I'll correct you on that, Dr. Ripley. I'll correct you on that because the minutes say that Mr. Veely excused Mr. Minkowitz both times.
Well, that didn't happen.
It's your minutes.
Which meeting was that? Was that the executive session where you left? Oh, okay.
Both executive meetings. They're your minutes.
That was the night that you decided you didn't want to be a board member anymore?
We'll have time to get to that tonight. You don't want to
Anybody else with comments? Mr. Geller, you know that you're not allowed to speak twice. We've gone through this before. Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment?
You don't treat anybody
Very
as a civil
unbecoming
person,
of
do you?
president, very unbecoming.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment?
Anybody want to get him out of office, let's do it.
And follow the rules.
They're your rules to protect yourself.
My name is Kathy Gomez. I live in Wantage. I am an alumni of High Point as well as my four brothers. I've always been very proud of my high school. I know as quirky as that sounds, at my age, I still am proud of it. Or at least I was up until the last few weeks. I'm also the mother of 3 children that were educated here at High Point, and I've always been very, very thankful to the staff. They've had some incredible teachers during their time here that I believe have had lasting effects and imparted lasting things to my children. Now I'm also a grandma, and for the first time in the last 2 weeks, I had to admit that I was glad that nothing short of a change in location would my grandchildren be attending High Point, and that makes me very sad. I don't begrudge Dr. Ripley an honest wage for what he does. I think he does the best that he is capable of doing. I don't begrudge any board member for giving their time from which they are never adequately reimbursed. Not in blood pressure, not in sleepless nights, and not in the conscience of having to make good decisions. However, Mr. Dunn, you did a great PowerPoint, and you did your best to present statistics. However, I'm going to say that statistics can tell any picture that you would like them to tell. What I'd like to focus on tonight, I am negotiations co-chair for my district. I am well aware of what the current county average is. I do not know how any teacher in this district cannot be impacted by the fact that you gave them less than the county average and gave Dr. Ripley what amounts to be, and Mr. Gettler will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, and to the best of my calculations, they got a 20% more raise this year than your teachers did. Shame on you. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. As best I see it, the actions of this board on so many levels that have been brought forth in the paper, in the media, and have come to light. Your actions have put a blight on public education in this county. On every board, on every other administrator, on every teacher. And ultimately that affects the students, the real reason that we're supposed to be here. Please go home and search your hearts.
Anyone else? Public comment? All right, we'll move on to non-committee board member reports and comments. Anybody have anything?
I have a couple. Dr. Ripley, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask 1 or 2 questions of yourself. There's obviously an issue the public wants to know. It could be an ethical issue, and the board should be aware of it if it is. Something has come up with you going out to dinner with Mr. Moranci, a newly elected board member. Is that true?
I have had dinner with Mr. Moranci, that is correct.
And have you paid for it yourself?
I did not pay for his family's meal. I
You
did
paid
not.
for your own.
I paid for my own family.
And the board, the taxpayer funds were used for it?
No, sir.
Okay. So it was not an ethical issue?
No, sir.
Thank you. The second thing I want to point out on the superintendent's evaluation, according to the New Jersey school boards, by February, we're already supposed to be doing, reviewing the superintendent's review process, setting timelines to the best of my knowledge. I'm sorry, for both the superintendent and the board evaluations. They're supposed to already be working on that and setting timelines. To the best of my knowledge, nothing has been done on that so far for this year. Two other issues. One is I'll mention that the board approved minutes from the executive committee said on January 21st that Mr. Veely asked Mr. Ripley, Ms. Anderson, and Mr. Binkowitz to leave, to step out of the meeting. And the minutes of the June 3rd say Mr. Binkowitz was excused from the meeting. It doesn't say who excused him, but since Mr. Ripley runs it, Mr. Veely runs it, I assume he did it. And finally, Mr. Veely, you again said in public, what you sent to me in private, just because I had to expose your lack of evaluating the superintendent, after I brought it up to you in executive meetings, and you scoffed at me about getting them done. So you forced me to bring it out in public. You then sent me an email asking me to resign from the board.
If one part of what you just said was true,
February, here, I'll pass it out, February 1st,
make sure you pass it around the entire
5:24
email
PM,
chain.
it's right here.
Was that before or after you
You
said
can
that
always
our
resign
committee
from the
meetings were
board should you
pointless
not wish to serve at all.
because they were non-issue?
I'll be
And
gone.
also,
And
that
you
you
did it
didn't
tonight.
want to waste your
I'm
time
finishing
in the
my
same committee.
You're welcome to speak.
And you said you did not wish to serve on any
There you
committees.
go.
And I said to you, you can resign if you wish.
And
So
I have
if
to tell
anybody
you,
would
Mr.
like the
Veely,
full context, by all
they're
means,
welcome to read it. Mr.
over
Veely,
the
I can
entire
tell you, you're
email.
petty.
And that was
you're not
also
efficient.
after you violated New Jersey School Board's rules and forming a quorum to discuss board business in violation of Open Public Meetings Act 1975. So would you like to talk about that? Now, let's say this.
Let's
Mr.
talk about
Kehoe, was that the first time that you've done that? And I've spoken to you repeatedly? Or was that probably the fourth or fifth time that you've been asked since you've been on this board to not violate New Jersey
He
rules?
also treats board members as trash.
Oh, yeah, he does.
No.
He actually, and Mr. Sullivan, I want to thank you
Is that-
for
are you done,
removing
Mr.
me
Kehoe?
from all the boards, from all the committees except for
Why don't you resign tonight?
At any rate,
Yeah.
are there any other committee, non-committee board member reports or comments?
Yes. Yes. When reading the Finance Committee minutes this week, I was disturbed by some of the discussion. Dr. Ripley's preliminary budget said that a reduction this year would hurt High Point's budget and have significant impacts on budgets over the next 6 years. I was alarmed to read that one member stated he would vote no unless the tax levy is zero. This statement and his response to my request for an explanation do not seem to keep educational welfare of children in mind. As a board, we're supposed to develop and maintain public schools. There are plans for cuts, but in light of the massive state reductions this past year and in the future, cutting the budget more would destroy the school. Some political groups would like to see the school, quote, burned, but the board is not allowed to bring partisan politics into its decisions. Suggesting that High Point teachers are paid too much and that a, quote, less than intelligent individual sitting in the state house is inflicting punishment on red counties, from my perspective, conveys that some board members are making decisions with partisanship rather than with the interests of the students. This is further demonstrated by the fact that after Dr. Ripley, an expert in education and school budgets, spent months in the preliminary budget, one member simply said nothing but 0% was acceptable. The lack of evaluation of the superintendent's work and the lack of educational reasoning shows that this member is more concerned about the taxpayers than the education of children. For the past 4 years, this board has voted a 0% or negative budget. If you look at the graphs Mr. Dunn presented, although some of you disagree with him, no other district has done this. This suggests to me that High Point's decisions have been unusual and extreme, not because it's on the cutting edge, but because it's actually acting politically. I ask the Finance Committee and the board as a whole evaluate how they are making decisions, trust the expert that they have hired, and put students first. The Finance Committee has been stacked with people who vote the same in order to avoid conflict. In a response to me, a member said, "We have always been flat or less since I have been here. So as far as I'm concerned, we will continue to do so." I think the board needs to discuss this in public since some members have their own political agenda. And Dr. Ripley, in your preliminary budget, you did request a reasonable tax levy increase. Did that tax levy increase include, make up for all the state budget cuts that we have included this past year and what is expected, even though we don't know the exact number for the next year?
We're anticipating a state reduction of $400,000, but any budget discussion was merely preliminary because the budget will be presented in March. It was an attempt to give the Finance Committee a general idea of where we were at, and that it was going to be too difficult to proceed further. But it was preliminary. It is a work in progress. It is not complete.
Any other reports or comments? All right, other business, anybody? All right, adjournment, I need a motion.
Hello?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?